Hello, welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life. As you know, we're talking about tonight's action, FanDuel and DraftKings for GPPs, and it's looking like a GPP kind of night. Not a lot of pitchers that you feel great about. Not any one particularly for FanDuel that you really just want to, that you're in love with for your cash games. So, going to be a lot of tournament entries on my end. I think that a lot of people are thinking the same tonight as well. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off here. We'll talk about a couple of these pitchers. Tyson Ross, $9,400 at Cincinnati on DraftKings. He's $9,000 on FanDuel. And this is a guy that he's been up and down. He's got a really high walk rate, 11.2%, but you like the strikeout rate of almost 25%. Ground ball rate of 63.5. He should be your top option, but he's also fairly risky, especially because he's wild. Does walk a lot of batters. All it takes is one mistake in that small ballpark, and there goes your quality start. So what's your take on Tyson Ross today? He GPP only type of guy for you?
I like him a little more than that just because there's no one else that really stands out. I think he's a cash game option, but I mean, I think he's a GPP guy more likely because he's not a favorite, even though it's basically a pick 'em. Well, I guess he is a favorite. What is he, minus 102 or something right now?
I mean, if you can even call that a favorite.
Yeah, right. I'm not like overly excited about him in cash games, but I think he's a GPP play. There's a decent amount of strikeout potential against this Reds team, and he's been pitching pretty deep into games. His biggest problem is his price, but I think that's just going to drive his ownership down more and more, and I think he makes for one of the better, if not the best, GPP option today.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly has a really high ceiling, like you mentioned. Some other guys, Carlos Martinez, $9,100 on FanDuel, and $9,100 also on DraftKings. Gets the Dodgers, of course, and as we know, Dodgers' top offense in the league against right-handed pitching. Martinez, probably a pretty safe option tonight despite a tough matchup. But the one concern you have with him is that he has not been particularly good against lefties this season. And obviously we know there's some big lefties in that lineup. You got Adrian Gonzalez, Jock Peterson, of course. Didn't hit a home run last night, but still hit a double, and he's been on fire. So you feel like you want to get yourself some pieces of him, but it is a tough matchup. And like I said, 333 WOBA allowed to lefties kind of scares me a little bit against this team.
Yeah, it definitely does. That's a big concern there. I mean, I like him, but I mean, it's definitely scary. It's definitely not. If I'm paying over 9,000, I'm probably going with Ross, I think, tonight.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for that. I mean, he's going against a softer lineup, and you know, like we said, I mean, these are the top options. So that's telling you how tough tonight's slate is, especially if you're looking at cash games. But fortunately, this GPP podcast, a guy I do like quite a bit is Jake Odorizzi. He's $8,600 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel he's $8,600 also. So a lot of same prices here. But he hasn't had recently one of those just real dominant games. But we've seen him. I mean, he's been in the 20s a lot in DraftKings. It was 23.6 last time he faced this Seattle team in Tampa. Now he gets a nice park shift. Had 7 Ks in that game, went 7 innings, 1 earned run.
Yep.
So, I mean, we saw a big strikeout upside from him last year. Haven't seen a lot this year, but he's doing a much better job of keeping the ball on the ground. And they have added Mark Trumbo, but Mark Trumbo, as we know, much better against lefties and righties. So, still not a lineup I'm particularly scared of.
Yeah, I'm not either. He's probably my favorite overall option today for GPPs. The price is a little up there, especially for what I believe is a dead even pick 'em right now.
Seems like that's the trend tonight. Pretty good.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the only guy that I think I saw as a pretty decent favorite is Volquez, and I don't feel great about him against Texas. I mean, Texas's bats have looked better since Hamilton got back. Joey Gallo's up now, and he's got a home run in 2 or 3 games. Yep. That offense isn't as bad as it's looked on paper over the last couple weeks. I think Adrian Beltre is starting to get a little bit healthier too, which is huge for them because that's a bat they've really been missing. He was doing almost nothing for the first month and a half of the season. He's been much better lately, so I don't feel great about that, despite him being a decent favorite. Honestly, my favorite safe play is probably Lincecum today, and I don't really usually use those 2 words in the same sentence. Yeah. So, I mean, he's minus 130 against a Philly team that, I mean, they're a little bit better against righties, but they're not a good hitting team. And, I mean, his price is a little bit better on DraftKings at 7,700. 8,500 on FanDuel is really tough to pay for him because, I mean, even if you just look at his last couple games, we've seen, as usual, absolutely both ends of the spectrum here. I mean, he put up 4.3 and 5 innings over the last 2 starts, but prior to that, he had gone 7 innings in 3 of 4 and had given up 0 runs in each one of those games. So, I mean, you can see him going both ways here. I think he's a pretty interesting GPP play on FanDuel, though. I think he's going to be really low owned for a guy that I think probably has the best chance of getting a win today. So I'm going to be using him quite a bit in tournaments on FanDuel, I think. DraftKings, he'll be a little bit heavier owned probably because of that 7,700 price tag, taking 2 pitchers. So he's probably more of a cash game play there. But in terms of GPP, I like him on FanDuel today.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you look at his numbers against righties, he's kind of scary, 369 WOBA allowed, but as we know, most of the better bats on this Philly team, Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, lefties. And you look at his numbers against lefties, he's been tremendous against lefties. 218 WOBA allowed, 121 ERA, and 29 2/3 innings this year. So, I mean, if you look at as far as qualified pitchers on tonight's slate against lefties, he's by far the best one. So, if there's anyone you can target, I mean, you get a weak offense against a guy that dominates lefties, I think that that's a good spot for him, definitely. Few other guys to consider. This is more of a DraftKings play than a FanDuel play. Scott Kazmir against a Boston team that's been really, really bad against lefties. One of the worst in the league. He's 7,500 on DraftKings, and he hasn't been great recently. In fact, he's been pretty bad in a couple of his starts. But last start, just pitched 3 innings. I believe he left with a shoulder injury, but they said he's fine now. Maybe there was something bothering him there because he was much, much better earlier in the season. But I do like this matchup against a team that's just really struggling against lefties. And it's another one of those situations, like you said, with Lincecum. It's going to be tough to pay $8,600 for him on FanDuel, but on DraftKings at $75, I think it's a much more manageable price tag there.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that's a DraftKings play for sure. FanDuel just doesn't feel right. Too many other options around that price tag. I mean, as far as cheap guys go, there's not even anyone you can really look too much at today. I mean, Aaron Sanchez for Toronto against Houston has a strikeout upside, obviously, since he's facing the team that strikes out the most against righties. He's a minus 133 favorite, actually, which is probably the best thing you can say about him outside of the Astros striking out a ton. But he hasn't been anything special. I mean, there's just not a lot at the bottom here to get excited about, even for GPPs. Sanchez has been a guy that's like good enough where he's like right around 15 DraftKings points most of the time. But I mean, I think his season high for strikeouts is 5, unless I missed one when I was going over it before the show here. So I mean, maybe you're looking at 7-8 strikeouts for him against Houston on a good day, and maybe gets to 20 DraftKings points. I mean, that's okay for 6,100, but it's not even like, if that's what you're getting as your best outing out of him, it doesn't feel great for GPPs even at that price.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do see 1-7 against Boston, but I mean, like you said, every other one 3, 4, 5. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think he's a fine option, but not a guy that's going to probably, on a single pitcher site get you 20 points, because I mean, I think that's reaching way too far.
Yep.
A couple other guys to consider. I like Charlie Morton as a cash game play. I don't like him as much as a GPP because he doesn't have that much upside, but Atlanta's a team that just hasn't been great against righties, and only 2 starts, but he's gone 14 innings total in them. Got wins in both. Allowed just 11 hits. Only 5 Ks is where you really, really don't like. But, $6,900 on FanDuel, I don't think he's a bad option. But also at the same time, he's been really tough on righties. Throughout his career, not so good against lefties. And obviously got to deal with guys like Freddie Freeman. So with this limited strikeout upside, I think that he's, fringe play at best, I would say. One more guy I'll throw out here. He's shown his dominance. He did it one time. He had a really, really good outing. And other than that, he's been kind of up and down. But he is really cheap. Raisel Iglesias, $6,400 on FanDuel, $56 on DraftKings. He's had some really bad outings. He's had some good outings. Like Atlanta, he went 8 innings, just gave up a couple hits, 5 Ks. Had 8 Ks in his last game against Washington, but got hit for a couple runs. So I think he's an interesting cheap play. Probably the biggest upside, I would say, of the really cheap options tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. Obviously not safe, but I agree with you. I think probably the most upside for sure.
All right. Any other pitchers you like for GPPs, or are you ready to move on?
Not really. I mean, we covered most of them. I mean, no one that I'm getting really excited about outside of the guys we talked about. And I'm not even honestly really that excited about most of the guys we talked about. I'm gonna be trying to focus on Odorizzi probably, and then mix in some of the cheaper guys if I can, and just load up on bats today. I mean, I feel like that's the way to go on this slate.
Yeah, and it seems like these kind of slates, where you don't have a lot of good pitching, for that reason, you're going to have a lot of hitters in good spots. So definitely get yourself take some advantage there and get some big bats into your lineup. I'll certainly be doing that. As we move on here to catcher, catcher's pretty weak for a big slate, despite the fact that there's some good options. Obviously, Coors Field has weather concerns because it's a day of the week that ends with Y, so keep that in mind. But Nick Hundley or Michael McHenry, whichever one's in the lineup, I'll be getting myself exposure to either one of them. They both have pretty good price tags on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I think that that's my preferred GPP play, really, whichever one of those guys is in. Is there anybody else that you're looking towards, you think you'll have a bunch of, or are you going to kind of mix it up here?
I think I'm probably going to spend up and take Posey a ton, honestly. I like him against Williams today. Obviously, it's a righty-righty matchup and not a perfect matchup, but like you said, everybody else is in a pretty tough matchup at catcher here today. Yep. Miguel Montero has a decent price again against a righty in Rourke, but he hasn't been great lately. You mentioned the Colorado guys. That's the way I'm going to go if I'm going cheap. Outside of that, we got Vogt against a lefty, Derek Norris against a righty. Russell Martin's okay, I guess, against a righty, but I don't want to pay the same price as Posey for him. I believe both sites is pretty close.
Yeah.
Maybe the one other guy I'll look at a little bit would be McCann at Yankee Stadium against Weaver, who just hasn't been good lately. That's who I always go back to on these days in catchers. Is look for McCann against a righty at home. Pay up for Posey, and then we already mentioned Norris and Vogt have the reverse splits today that I'm not really looking too closely at. You can't even really go with Grandal today because Martinez is, I think, too good of a pitcher to really attack him at that price. Catcher's really tough today.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more guy here. Jacob, JT, whatever you want to call him, Real Muto. He's $4,000 on DraftKings, $2,800 on FanDuel. Yep. Get yourself some cheap Coors exposure against Eddie Butler, but it's not a play I love, especially not on DraftKings at that price. But at 2.8 on FanDuel, I don't mind it.
Yeah, I don't either. That's not too bad. I don't want to pay $4,000 for him on DraftKings, though. Really, one guy that has been hot lately is Saltalamacchia is catching a decent amount for Arizona right now, and I think he's got 4 hits in his first 4 games. He had a home run last night. He's cheap. And if he's in the lineup in the 6th hole again, I think you can feel okay about it, but I don't feel great about it.
No, I don't. There's a reason why he wasn't on a Major League roster there for a little while. So, he's still not a very good hitter at this point in his career. But like you said, he's cheap. Maybe ride the hot hand. It is GPPs. You want to take your shots. And maybe he's got some confidence going finally. But moving over to first base, most expensive option is also one of your better ones. Paul Goldschmidt gets John Neese. Not a bad lefty by any means, but anytime you get Goldie against a lefty at home, you're going to consider it. 55 on FanDuel, 57 on DraftKings. Certainly going to keep his ownership low, but I love him. I think my favorite play, I wanted to play him in this matchup last night. Pitcher got bumped, so fortunately for me, I get to play him tonight. Lucas Duda, $3,800 on FanDuel and $4,200 on DraftKings. Gets Jeremy Hellickson. I love the Mets because I cannot stand Jeremy Hellickson, and I love playing hitters against him because he's awful.
Yeah, Dude is a good play. I think in that same range, Brandon Belt's a pretty good play against Williams. I'm going to be targeting Jeremy Williams a decent amount today. I think my 2 favorite plays by far, though, are the 2 guys at the top of the price range, though, Goldschmidt and Cabrera. Cabrera facing a pretty weak lefty in Quintana. You mentioned Goldschmidt against Neese already. Both of those guys, you can get them against lefty, have massive upside. Yeah. So I'm going to be trying to fit them in GPPs a ton because especially Goldschmidt at that 57 on DraftKings and I believe 55 on FanDuel, I think he's going to be way under-owned in GPPs. Yeah. Despite the great matchups there. But I do like Duda. I do like Belt. Jose Abreu, another guy at the top of the price range. I think he's 5,500 on DraftKings facing a weak lefty and Ryan for Detroit. I think he's another top play up there. Mixing in those top 3 plays at first base, one of those guys is going to have a monster game today.
Yeah, and Abreu's got a really nice price tag still at FanDuel, just 3.7 for him.
Yeah.
So. I'll throw out Adrian Gonzalez as well because Carlos Martinez, like you mentioned, is a good pitcher, but his weak side is against lefties, so he hasn't been terrible against lefties by any means, but if there's one way you could target him, it's a 331 WOBA allowed to lefties, and I like Adrian Gonzalez's price tag on both sides. $4,000 on FanDuel, $43 on DraftKings. I think makes him a nice target for your GPPs tonight.
Yeah. And we won't have to worry about that huge ownership on FanDuel with David Ortiz tonight, hopefully. Well, I mean, maybe people will, but it'll be nice if they do because him facing a lefty, I don't even really want to pay 2,600 for him.
No, not a chance. I'd much rather go with his teammate Mike Napoli,
Yep.
3,300 on FanDuel, 42 DraftKings. Obviously, I'm not trying to go out of my way to pick on Casimir, but if there's one guy I'm going to play against him for sure, well, I guess two guys, Napoli or Dustin Pedroia if I'm going to play.
Yeah, Pedroia, who I'm sure we're going to get to right now at the top of second base. I think he's a great second base play today against lefty and Casimir. I mean, he's got more home runs on the year already now than he did all of last season, I think. Didn't he have 8 all last year? He's got 9 now.
Yeah, I think so. Or something, right, real close to that. No, he has 8 this year, so it might have been 8 with 7. But either way, he's really heating up. I mean, homered again last night.
Yeah,
Like getting some multi-hit games. Had 4 a couple games ago, and FanDuel really hasn't caught up to his pricing yet. Still just $3,200. So
right.
42 on DraftKings isn't a bad price for him either in this spot.
No, overall, he's in a pretty good spot here. I mean, especially with second base being a little bit weak again today. I mean, you can always look at Kipnis, who's been outrageously hot, but I mean, he's a steep price increase from Pedroia on both sites, I believe. I mean, 3,200 for Pedroia on FanDuel compared to what Kipnis is over there, up over 4,500. I mean, it's just hard to get really excited about him, even though it's a pretty good matchup against Tillman, a righty, but I don't know if I can pay 4,800 for him when, I mean, on FanDuel, you almost have to spend up a pitcher today.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, some other options, Ben Zobrist, I know you love him. Wade Miley, I don't know if you love him today, but I know you love him in general. Gets a bad lefty in Wade Miley, $4,200. So he's a nice price. And once again, he's really cheap on FanDuel, just $3,000. So I think if you're not going Pedroia, he's probably your next logical option there.
Yeah, I like him quite a bit there. I don't love him for 4,200 on DraftKings. I'd go Pedroia almost every time at a similar price. I think you can look at some other guys at second base too. I mean, can look at some cheap options like I think Elmore is still 2,000 on DraftKings and the minimum on FanDuel too. He's been hitting 6th every day. Hasn't been outstanding, but getting on base every other game or so. And we saw in his first couple starts that he has a little bit of upside. Facing a lefty and Happ today, which is always nice. He's been better against lefties in his minor league career too, so I don't mind him there. A couple other cheap guys. Skip Schumacher against Ross, 2,200 on both sites. Hitting 6th or 7th in the order for the most part. Not a ton to love it as far as cheap guys go, though. I think I'm probably going to be playing a ton of Pedroia and then looking around for some other GPP options.
Yeah, and if you want to ride a hot hand, he does have a tough matchup, but Brandon Phillips, 37 on DraftKings, 33 on FanDuel, 10 hits in his last 4 games, home run, 3 doubles, even a couple steals. So I think that he's an interesting option tonight. Definitely a streaky hitter, and he's getting it going right now. Third base options, of course, you can go the contrarian route, go Miguel Cabrera at third base if you like. Play someone else. That's DraftKings only, of course. We don't need to mention Nolan Arenado, the other Colorado bats. Just know that Miami and Colorado guys in play here, of course. Anthony Rendon had his first game back last time out. We know, well, you might not know if you're new to DFS, this guy absolutely crushes left-handed pitching. Now he gets to Yoshiwada. Obviously, you know, playing in Washington, not the best ballpark, but even tried to steal a base last night, looks like. So at $4,500 on DraftKings is pretty pricey for him, but it seems like he's completely healthy if they're having him, unleashing him to steal bases. And we know the Cubs not the best at throwing guys out on the base paths either. So $3,900 on FanDuel, not a bad price for him either.
Yeah, don't mind that at all. I mean, he's in a really good spot here. I mean, looked good yesterday in his first start back. I feel pretty good about him overall.
Yeah, a couple other guys to consider here at third base. I don't love most of these guys. Yasmani Tomas finally has third base eligibility on DraftKings, $4,100. We know his track record in the minors against lefties really good. $3,000 on FanDuel. I think he's a nice tournament option. Alex Rodriguez against Jared Weaver. Obviously, Yankee Stadium. I think that he's in play as well. You consider Joey Gallo, of course. He's had those 2 big games. Didn't really do much last night. Went 1 for 4 with a walk. But outside of that, I'm probably not going to go cheap at third base because I think there's some good options up top. But Evan Longoria is way too cheap once again.
Yeah, definitely. He's way too far down there right now. One guy on DraftKings, Ruben Tejada, has been hitting second for the Mets. You mentioned you like picking on Hellickson. He has shortstop eligibility on DraftKings, so we can mention him at shortstop too. But that's a really strong play at 2,900 on DraftKings. He's cheap on FanDuel too. Let me look and see real quick what position he is on FanDuel now.
Third base. They moved.
Oh, they did move him to third base. Okay,
unfortunately.
Cool. Yeah, I was wondering when they were going to do that. They just took away what's his face's catcher eligibility too yesterday. Nate Gaddis. Yeah, that was frustrating.
Yeah,
because that was one of the catchers I was going to every day. Now I'm stuck with paying up for Posey all the time in cash games.
Yeah, I mean, there's many less options now after that. But
I know. I like Tejada on both these sites, so under 3,000 on both. He's been red hot.
I think I'll play him at shortstop on DraftKings almost exclusively if I'm not paying for Tulo tonight.
Yep, I like that move.
Other guys you could certainly consider Hanley Ramirez against the lefty. I'm not sure how much you enjoy suffering, but he certainly has the upside. Seems to be that he disappears more than he produces, but he's certainly in play. I mean, whether or not he's completely healthy remains to be seen, but either way, he does crush lefties. Xander Bogaerts has shortstop eligibility on DraftKings as well at $3,900. I believe he's still shortstop eligibility. Yeah, shortstop at 26 on FanDuel. And he batted fifth last time they faced a lefty, too, so that's an interesting play as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's go ahead and move on here to the outfield. Your top option, let's go ahead and tell you now. I mean, we'll see if you agree. Giancarlo Stanton in Coors Field. It's kind of hard to go away from Giancarlo Stanton against an average pitcher in the best ballpark in the world.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, as much as I like those guys at first base that I mentioned, if I'm spending way over 5,000 on someone today, it's probably going to be him. He's going to be heavy owned, but honestly, I think he's probably worth it.
Yeah, you got to get yourself some Giancarlo Stanton tonight. Especially, I mean, I think even in cash games, you probably got to get yourself some if you can. You're obviously not paying a ton for pitching tonight. I think you can make it happen pretty easily. But yeah, I mean, he's got enormous upside. Homered twice in Marlins Park in the last 2 games. Gets a huge park upgrade. We don't need to tell you how hard this guy hits the ball. He's phenomenal playing. I think an interesting under the radar play DraftKings wise is going to be Michael Kadire. He's 4,800. You struggle to pay that price tag, but I think a lot of people won't. And $2,700 on FanDuel. I really like Michael Kadire in that spot tonight.
Yeah, really hard to argue with there. I mean, that's just a great matchup for him.
Yep. Other guys, if you're not a believer in Jake Odorizzi and turning around Nelson Cruz, he's going to have to try to battle to keep his home run lead tonight. He's only up by 1 now on Giancarlo Stanton, and Stanton's in a much better spot tonight as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the big thing there is just that he's not in the best spot out of those guys.
Yep. Other guys, Chris Tillman has been good. He's also been bad at times, so I like some of these Indians bats. Michael Brantley, of course. Brandon Moss. Brandon Moss, has huge upside, especially against a righty. Should be batting cleanup tonight. I like him. And a guy that just keeps crushing the ball, stealing bases, scoring runs, no one talks about. A.J. Pollock, $4,600 on DraftKings. You got to pay a lot for him, $4,700 on FanDuel, but especially on a big slate, he's going to be way too low owned. He's got that protection with Paul Goldschmidt behind him. And, I mean, the guy's having himself a hell of a season. Stealing bases, scoring runs. He's doing it all.
Yeah, he definitely is. Another guy that's really hot right now, Will Venable. Batting first in the order against righties. Iglesias, not a tough guy for Cincinnati that I'm really scared of. Obviously, some home run potential in that park. Another guy in that price range. I always like Billy Burns, especially against a lefty. I like his bat a little bit more against lefties. Obviously, he cuts down on his stolen bases a little bit, but Miley, not really a guy that's known for his holding base runners on anyway, despite being a lefty. So
he's not going to hold him at the plate either.
Yeah, right. There was one other guy I had. Tyler Moore against a lefty in WADA. I don't mind. I'd prefer he be hitting higher than the 8th spot that he's hit the last couple games for Washington, but at 2,500, I mean, he's been a guy that's been pretty heavily owned by a lot of really, really strong DFS players, and so I feel like he's a pretty good option against a lefty anytime he's out there.
Yeah, and we did see him back cleanup 3 games ago, and he had a nice productive day.
Yeah, that was against a lefty too, so there's a good chance that if he's facing a lefty, he hits a little bit higher up. I think he's got a couple 6th-spot appearances against lefties too. If he's in the 6th spot at 2,500, he becomes a really, really strong play for me.
Yeah, on FanDuel, you don't love him as much. You love his price tag and min salary, but he is only first base eligible there, so that takes away from his appeal, of course, because if you're like us, you like to pay at first base. Other options, of course, you're considering all the outfielders for Miami and Colorado, whoever's in the lineup. No analysis necessary there. Brett Gardner at home against Jared Weaver and his decreased velocity. All he really needs to do is get on base, and he's got a great chance of stealing some bases, scoring some runs. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention Jock Peterson, of course.
Yep.
He didn't homer last night, but he still hit a double. So not a bad game for him. And I mean, he's probably still going to have be pretty heavily owned, but obviously not the kind of ownership we saw in Coors Field. He's 4,300 FanDuel, 44 DraftKings. I don't mind going that way either.
No, I don't either. I feel like he's a pretty strong play also, for sure.
Definitely. I'll throw out a couple more guys. Alex Gordon and Lorenzo Cain both on the Kansas City side. We've mentioned this a million times. No one seems to play these guys. Cain homered last night. He's got steal upside. Alex Gordon obviously in a great spot in this matchup. Not having an awesome season, but that'll keep his ownership down. And Steven Souza has been destroying left-handed pitching. It hits the ball a ton, so I like him as well.
A FanDuel only play basically for me. Rajai Davis is probably going to lead off for Detroit. He's a ridiculous 4,400 on DraftKings. You can't really play him there, even GPPs, honestly.
Yeah.
But on FanDuel, he's much cheaper than that. I want to say he's 20. Let me check really quick.
I think he's 3K.
3K, exactly, yeah. So, I mean, he's a pretty strong play there when he's leading off against a lefty. I really like that one as a FanDuel only play. There was one other guy I had in that same kind of range, but I lost it now. Oh, you mentioned AJ Pollock already, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, he's more of a FanDuel only guy for me. I don't really want to pay $4,600 for him on DraftKings. One other guy I like quite a bit, just overall, is Brett Gardner. I like targeting Weaver. I've been doing it most of the season. And speaking of that, I just happened to catch on my screen here while I was looking at the Yankees projected lineup. Brian McCann got hurt last night and probably isn't going to play today. So their backup catcher is minimum on both sites, I believe, but I don't know anything about him right now. I'm going to have to look him up today. So
yeah. Another guy to mention against a lefty in J.A. Happ, Joey Butler has been batting right around 7th. He's been hitting for some power. He's been crushing the ball. $3,000 on FanDuel and $3,700 on DraftKings. I think he's a really interesting play. That his price is starting to creep up, so some people might be off of him. I will not be one of those people. I think he's still in a really good spot tonight. I'll get a lot of exposure to him. I think he's a fine cash game play, I think, too, on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, might as well ride him while he's hot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to love lineup spots, so you can't argue with that. And with that, anybody else you want to mention before we go ahead and get out of here?
I think we covered just about everybody. I mean, there's a couple other. You mentioned Alex Gordon. I have Nick Markakis as a similar play against Morton. He's been hitting cleanup for the Braves and looking pretty good. Not too much else. There's one other guy I had on here that I was looking at. Depending on how Boston shakes up their lineup today, Rusney Castillo has really good splits against lefties, so it'd be interesting to see where he hits in the lineup. Like if they give Ortiz a rest or something like that, I think he can hit way up in the lineup, and that would be an interesting GPP play for me also.
Yeah, and he's really cheap on FanDuel at just 2.5K. So
yep.
Certainly in play there. And with that, that's going to wrap things up for us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and find us at dailyfantasycafe.com for tons of great content for tonight and every other slate. And we'll see you guys next time.